The first speaker we have now is Phil Jones from Coventry University. He's going to be talking about the program they've been running on digital leaders.
Okay, thank you. Cheers. My name's Phil Jones. I'm a librarian. So just to give you a bit of a potted biography of myself and a bit of background, I started off in public libraries, spent about 10 years in public libraries, from library assistant to eventually library manager. Then I went into higher education, became a subject librarian, and just recently I took the job of academic liaison manager at Coventry University. So Coventry University is a relatively new one. It tends to think of itself as very fast-moving, and they use the word lean a lot and agile. So it's quite good it's a good place to get new things off the ground. It's not necessarily a good place when it comes to planning and being strategic and giving people the time to do what they need to do. So there's advantages and disadvantages of that. So the library team that I'm based in, the academic liaison team, work in the Disruptive Media Learning Lab, which is at the top of the library. It's a very Orwellian title, but essentially it's just a big open office we share with education researchers, the Office for Teaching and Learning, student activators, and also those pesky academics as well. So we have quite a lot of people around that we can call on with expertise in things like digital tools. Because a lot of what the Disruptive Media Learning Lab does involves promoting and using digital tools. A lot of the projects they run rely on digital tools to actually work, because they're international and quite complicated and need that kind of thing. So my personal interest in digital literacy was from when I was teaching as a subject librarian. I had a kind of Damascene moment when I was starting to teach a session on referencing using Twitter. And everyone had signed up for Twitter accounts before the session. I made the foolish assumption that people would know what hashtags were, what handles were, and how Twitter all worked. And I hadn't factored in 15 extra minutes to explain to everyone how to use a hashtag. So I realized that I'd made a lot of assumptions about the level of digital literacy that students might be at, and that students needed help to develop, because I've got to the level of digital literacy I've got to over the course of 15, 20 years of using tools, and I can't assume that students will get there straight away and know what they're doing. So what I'm going to talk about today is our Digital Leaders Programme, how we did it, and why we did it, and what we did, and some of the lessons that we learned. I'm not going to try and do activities today because we don't really have enough time. But I will show you a video of one of our digital leaders, because I'm aware it's nice to see a student and have them talk about digital literacy themselves, and for you to experience that. And as we go along, if you want to ask any questions, please just wave your hand or put your hand up. I don't mind being interrupted at all. So this Digital Leaders Programme is a pilot. It's run through its first iteration. It's just finishing now. So the projects that have been developed as part of it are just at the process of closing, and we are wrapping up our research on it as well. So we don't yet know what the impact is, or how well it's done, or badly. So unfortunately I can't update you on that, but I can tell you how we set it, problems we came across, and some of the lessons learned. We did initially intend it to be a student-led project. That's one of the things that went by the wayside. So this is going to be a fairly warts and all account of what we did, because obviously you learn from mistakes, probably better than you learn from successes. So the eventual structure of our Digital Leaders Programme was essentially that we brought in a cohort of students. We delivered 5 teaching sessions to kind of upskill them on digital literacy, and then those that were interested could submit an application by video to become an actual digital leader, and then go off and deliver their own projects to help their fellow students to develop their own digital literacies. That was quite a torturous process to get to this stage. It took more than a year and a half, and quite a lot of things went by the wayside. So you'll see a mention of open badges there. We didn't get to do that. Didn't have time. Termly grants, that turned into something else as well. So in the end, we ended up paying them via timesheets. So there was a big difference between what we ended up delivering and what we'd actually initially planned to deliver. Partially because we had so many different people involved, and so many different people to run things past before we were allowed to do things. The reason that I first thought about setting up this program was because I was in a course development meeting with the engineering faculty at Coventry, and as part of course development, everyone has to look at how they deliver digital literacy or how they help students to become digitally literate through the course. And just from listening to the way that people were conceptualizing digital literacy and what they thought of as actual digital skills, I realized there was a definite gap in knowledge there. And actually, reflecting on it now, possibly it was more in the staff, and we maybe want to aim what we do next time at staff rather than students. But they were talking about very functional skills, like can they use Word, can they use Excel. They weren't thinking about reflective use of digital tools. So that was kind of the reason that we decided to set it up. We looked at things like the JISC framework, and we looked at other similar projects, so iCham and Saddle, and Jane Secker very kindly shared things like teaching resources. So we did do a bit of research, and we used that to develop what we decided to teach the students or get them to learn. Just a bit of context, it was happening at the time of Brexit and the American elections. That was when we were doing the sessions, so it gave us some meaty stuff to talk about and to contextualise digital literacy, which was very useful for us. The early planning, essentially what we had to do was submit a sort of business case to the Disruptive Media Learning Lab to become a project that they would take on board. And we did that, and we got funding. We were assigned a project lead and a researcher to help us, as well as some student activators. So it's very useful to have the DMLL's help in that way. But there were disadvantages to having other people involved and not necessarily everyone knowing who was in charge and who was supposed to be doing what. That was a bit of an issue. There was also a little bit of frustration at the speed of things happening. So I think on both sides, because myself and my colleague Holly, who planned the Digital Leaders Programme, had full-time jobs, and we are librarians, or were at the time. So our thing was information literacy and teaching. So we were kind of using all our spare time to do this. And I think we expected that the project leader from the Disruptive Media Learning Lab would take on more of the burden. But I think they wanted us to lead on the project. So there was a bit of tension there. And this isn't why, but staff changed partway through, and we got a different project lead. And things kicked on a little bit more after that because they were a little bit more proactive. So that really helped us to actually develop the program. We did a survey to find out what we thought what the students wanted in the way of digital literacy, what they understood it to mean, and how useful it could be to them, as well as what they might value as a title for a program, what they might want to put on their CV. So we did a survey, and we found out what the students thought. They had very similar ways of conceptualizing digital literacies as the staff. So we found it it was very sort of functional, skills-based approach. They weren't really thinking about how they use tools or the implications of privacy and things like that. So we worked out we needed to make sure they knew what they were going to be signing up for, because if they were coming expecting Excel spreadsheet classes, they were going to be disappointed. We promoted via social media, via Moodle, and also through inductions. So we had one of our student activators went into very large cohort inductions and introduced the program, got people's email addresses, and I think he got about 200 email addresses in the end. He did a really good job for us, so I would definitely recommend that kind of activity to anyone thinking about running a similar program. There were some incentives for the students, as it turned out. So we did manage to get them their own websites. It's called Domains of One's Own. It was a project that was going on in the Disruptive Media Learning Lab as well. And through that, we gave each digital leader their own website that they could use. Obviously, they also got to put it on their CV, and it was good for their potential career prospects. But we were quite keen not to hammer the whole career thing too much, because at Coventry, everything's focused on careers, and we felt like to think about digital literacy on the whole, really, and how it will improve your life. So the workshops that we actually delivered were a sort of introductory one where we encouraged the students to think about what kind of digital animal they were, what kind of digital competencies they tend to use most. Obviously, we did get them to go and do a kind of activity where they'd kind of identify with certain animals and talk in groups and feedback, and I was going to do something similar, but I think we're all probably digitally literate in this room, and there's not enough time. So there was that initial session, and there was 3 thematic workshops based around the sort of JISC competencies. Broad areas like social networking, communication, well-being and privacy, and finding, handling and sharing info. The final workshop was very focused on how you can actually pass this stuff on and how you talk to your peers about this kind of thing, because we learned from other projects that that can be something that students actually struggled with more than anything else, was working out ways of helping their peers. We had 40 people who got involved in the programme. Initially we did plan to say that they could only go on to become digital leaders if they went to at least 3 sessions, but we quickly dropped that because we wanted to make sure we had more digital leaders. So those were just the digital animals I was talking about. I think you can Google that. We borrowed this from somewhere. I can't remember exactly where. My colleague Holly would know. We did reference it. So the final thing we did in that final session was to get people to brainstorm about what kinds of projects they might deliver. This was a kind of activity I was thinking about doing, but we don't really have time for that. So in the final session, when the students were brainstorming about how they might pass on digital literacy, they came up with loads of ideas. So we put them on a Padlet wall, and then we kind of created an Office 365 form to get the students to vote on which ideas they thought were best, and therefore which ones they might want to take forward in future. So those that were interested and were keen to get involved had to submit an application to become an actual digital leader. So this application was by video, and I'll show you one in a second. But essentially, it just asked them to explain why they wanted to be a digital leader and what kind of project they might want to deliver. One thing that surprised us was how the students took that brief and then did like 15-minute videos with song and dancing, and they did some really interesting and funky things with it. And we really were only looking for like 1 or 2 minute videos because we had a limited amount of time, but it was nice that they did that, and we did appreciate it. There was 4 kind of natural groupings that came up in the ideas that they came up with. So we kind of split them into 4 project groups once we worked out who our digital leaders were going to be and who successfully applied. 16 people sent in videos, and they were all accepted because they were all good. So we had sort of bigger project teams, and then also the students were encouraged to do things on their own if they wanted to. So for example, one of them did a project on webcam stickers on the whole privacy side, because obviously people can spy on you through your webcam. But I think possibly when we do it next time, we probably will try and narrow it down a little bit more, because I felt like we had too many things going on and not enough impact, really. And I've heard something on Radio 4 the other day where they were talking about Steve Jobs at Apple coming in back into the company, and they had sort of 300 projects going on. He slimmed it down to the 3 best, and I think they turned into the iPad, the iPod, and something else. What would it be? iPad, iPod. Yeah, something else really impressive. iPhone. So yeah, maybe next time we'll slim it down and try and get a bit more impact. So this is one of our digital leaders. This is her application. This is Janine.
Hi, I'm Janine, and this is my video application for digital leaders. Sorry for the lack of pizzazz in my video, but I just wanted to be straight to the point and tell you why I wanted to be on the program. So I've been surrounded by the digital world for as long as I can remember, and all the technology that it entails, and I just remember MSN and Friendster and Windows 95, and it's been evolving so much to the point that people feel really unsure about how to use it, or the iPads and Macs going around. And I just wanted to encourage and show people that you don't always have to be a rocket scientist to use the internet and the digital world. Instead, foot in it and make it work for you. It doesn't always have to be doom and gloom or stranger danger if you know what to do. So I just want to teach or encourage those that get frustrated with people that don't understand, and let them know that they need support, especially the digitally challenged. Wow, I can't say that word. And for potential digital initiatives, I was thinking along the lines of helping those with careers, perhaps teaching prospective students of all ages to research into their dream job. They'll find out there isn't just one route, find a route to suit them, and teaching them how to use the internet and other technologies. And for example, LinkedIn's already established to research those already in the position, what their experiences are and how to network with them and get connections that will let people get those opportunities or anything similar.
Okay, so Janine's project group focused on the careers aspect. It was very important to the students, and they created some case studies as a way of teaching other students what kinds of tools they might use to research their future careers or to network. So that's just one of them as an example. Some of the sessions that the students put on, and another group did some more general sessions on digital literacy for their fellow students. Some of them weren't very well attended, some of them nobody came to. Partly that was a factor of the students not getting promotional material ready in time and things like that. We realised as we went through the project that we needed to be a little bit more directive with the students than we were. We wanted it to be more student-led, but they have demands on their time, and you can't forget the fact that they are studying for a degree and they have a lot of things to do. But at the same time, you do have to try and set deadlines and make sure they're as motivated as they can be, and not just assume they'll do everything as you might do it. Okay, so some of the other projects that we ran. This one didn't happen, unfortunately, the YouTube video series. That was one we were hoping to happen, but the person who was really heavily into that idea when she proposed it kind of faded, just dropped out of the project. So we didn't get to do that, but other things did happen. Okay, so one of the things that worked well was the working with other teams. It was useful, really useful in fact. It was the Office for Teaching and Learning that got us in touch with the student activator who went into all the lectures and got us our students. It was the marketing team that got us onto Moodle and prominent in front of the students. We also found we got a bit more respect as librarians through this project because it was a relatively high profile thing. So people who weren't within the library came to our sessions, and academics and people from the Office for Teaching and Learning who had assumptions about how librarians might teach were impressed, I think, because we did do active learning. We got them in groups, we got them to feed back, we got them to do various things as part of the learning. So it was good for the profile of the librarians at university. It was good for the students. They got an awful lot out of it, I think, the ones that took part and did manage to sustain the projects. And they were really fun to work with. The first year of planning was a grind because it just felt like it was taking forever and there was lots of barriers in the way. But once we actually started teaching the students and the students were involved, it really picked things up a bit and you got a lot more energy. So if you can just sustain it up to the point where you actually deliver whatever you're planning to deliver, then it's worth it, definitely. Some of the challenges, though, this has come up before, but money. We did end up paying them, so we did end up with them submitting timesheets, which created a sort of employer-employee relationship, even if we didn't want it to. And I'm not sure how helpful that was. It was also a complete faff. So, for example, yesterday morning, I got a panicky email about 2 of our students who thought they had national insurance numbers but didn't, and they'd submitted timesheets, so we've got a bit of a issue to sort out there. There's lots of unexpected things that happen when you start paying people, so I'm not sure I'd advise doing it myself. And next year, I don't think we'll involve it because the students that took part didn't seem to think it was motivating them much, and that's evidenced in how late they were in submitting timesheets and how hard it was to get actual timesheets off them. I think they were fairly intrinsically motivated, the ones that actually wanted to take part in the programme. Other challenges, it was time consuming. It took an awful lot of time. It was possibly too many projects on the go at the same time, so yeah, we'd slim that down. You need very clear roles about who's actually leading the project, and if you're going to work with other teams or collaborate, one of you needs to be the one that drives it and sets timescales and things. And in future, we might just take this on as a library thing and not actually work with the DMLL. Not that it wasn't a terrible experience, but things happened, like you got arbitrary performance targets partway through the project that you hadn't planned for, and yeah, so that was an unwelcome development. Also, funding dropped out at one point, so we had to change the way we were doing things. So yeah, I think it possibly is better if you don't involve money or giving the students money. We also had to turn away 2 course cohorts because tutors heard about this and they were interested in getting their students involved, but there was a capacity issue. So next time we have to work out how we can actually involve whole course cohorts, maybe as partners for the digital leaders. Yeah, so there was a few challenges, a few negative things, a few positive things, but overall it was a fantastic thing to be involved in. And I'd definitely recommend setting one up in your university if you haven't already. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to cover, really. Any questions?
If you have some microphones around, if anyone has got any questions.
No?
Okay.
Yeah, I was really interested, especially in working with students. So I've worked with lots of universities with students. One of the big barriers has been getting ethical approval through the ethics committee when you start doing this. How much of a barrier was that, especially given that you're putting students out there?
Not much for us, because we had a researcher. So she basically did all the ethics. She organised the focus groups and things, and she's going to deliver the final product of how it's gone. So for us, that was one of the easy bits. That working with the DMLL was very positive in that way. We didn't have to deal with it. We did do it, but someone else did it. Is it this gentleman here?
Thank you. I think it follows from that actually, which is you mentioned the kind of co-location with the Disruptive Media Learning Lab and the academics, librarians, and technologists, and so on. Could you just talk about how how that benefits the kind of movement you have there overall, and how you work together?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's hot desking. So technically, everyone can sit wherever they want, but people being people, you end up with names on the back of chairs, and people sitting the same place every day. So there's some people that embrace it. There's some people that aren't so keen on it. It's fair to say that some people that get into librarianship aren't necessarily keen on having ebullient and kind of loud people in an office, and Skype meetings going on when they're trying to do cataloguing or whatever. So it doesn't work for some people. For other people it does, and it means that you can just pop over and talk to someone in the Office for Teaching and Learning if you've got an issue with a reading list, or if you want to think about doing a PG Cert if you're a librarian, for example. If you want a PG Cert in Teaching and Learning, you can just pop into the Office for Teaching and Learning and speak to somebody about it. So it's really good in that it enables you to do things that you might not have done before because you wouldn't know who to talk to. So having the people there in the office really helps. And they run lots of events and things about digital literacy and light bite program of stuff about various different tools and applications. So our librarians are quite digitally literate because of that. It definitely helps.
Have we got time for one more question?
Gentleman in the back.
Thank you. You said that it turned out that wages weren't the main incentive for students to take part. Did you get an idea of what the main incentive was?
It was jobs. It was the CV. It was how it would look on applications. That was the main thing. They actually weren't. The money thing didn't actually get approved until we'd got the digital leaders' applications reviewed and we'd actually got our digital leaders in place. So we didn't say they were definitely going to get money as part of it. So they got involved and they did actually apply without that promise. So I think it's true that it wasn't really motivating them. It was probably a nice perk, and it probably meant that some who wouldn't have been able to get involved because of money reasons were able to. So that was a benefit.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.